잠깐만. 무슨 얘기 하래, 이거 지금.
Right. When you're, yeah.
Alright, I'm just nervous.
Tell us what it is, don't worry. Just tell us your name, tell us what it is. Tell us what you're talking about.
Hi, I'm Louis.
Yeah? Good start.
Alright, so this is about my Greek mythology podcast, which I've named Mythic. Easy name. So the idea is to give a sort of introduction to the mythology, because it's something that's been in a lot of media lately, over the past sort of decade or so. I've seen it become more and more popular, but the kind of things that are like Clash of the Titans and the Hercules movie and stuff that you see, it doesn't give a lot of context for the mythology itself. It sort of just expects you to understand the characters and events that have happened in the mythology. And I don't think it's taught enough in schools to sort of understand it sometimes. So Percy Jackson, for example, I've started reading that, and that's the reason I came up with my idea. Because I wanted to look more into mythology to understand some of the sort of context that was being given in that without going fully into depth. And yeah, it's a highly successful series, but I wonder how much people who read it actually understand the mythology itself rather than the characters as they're being presented in that one work. So one of my biggest influences was Stephen Fry's Mythos series, which at the moment he's got 2 books. I think he's working on the 3rd this. So he's got the mythology, and then he's got heroes, and I think he's working on specifically the Odyssey, which is a big story in the mythology to do with some of the heroes and some of the gods sort of coming together. And this is his telling of like why he got into the mythology in the first place.
About that moment, what was it about those Greek myths that really hooked you?
It is one of those childhood things where something about this world and its detail, I think children respond immensely to a detailed world that they can enter and discover. I guess it's one of the secrets behind Harry Potter and J.R.R. Tolkien and J.R.R. Martin and all those kinds of writers who create a fully realized, peopled world. And the Greeks did it, but not from a single author, but from a whole kind of mythology. And unlike almost any other mythology I've ever come across, it has a timeline. It begins with the creation of the universe, and it goes through these rather elemental, primordial deities, and slowly they acquire colour and character and absolute definition.
And that's something he talks about a lot.
Stephen, thank you, sir.
At the start of the Mythos book is all about the fact that there's a sort of timeline to it, and it's one overarching story as well as all these little stories in between. And I think my target audience is the kind of people who want to write about something, and they need to go back and look at some of the first stories ever told and how that still relates today, and how stories have changed and that kind of thing. This is a quote that's at the very beginning of Mythos, and it's the last line. I hope they will do the same for you, after he talks about how I inspired him in the first place. And that's something that I've said in my conclusion to my podcast. I've wanted to say to the audience, I've given you your introduction, your sort of head start. You go and look at these sources for yourself and find out more about it. So during it, obviously, it started as a documentary, and I had to change it because what I wanted from the start was a documentary where I was showing, clips from movies and artwork from Greek mythology and things, but it didn't seem to fit with the way I was narratively telling the story. It didn't sort of one-for-one go with what I was saying. So I looked through a few different ideas. I had this idea of having sort of portraits of different events and going one by one on sort of like a wall tapestry kind of idea. Zooming into one, talking about one event, and then zooming into the next and doing it that way. But I wasn't sure how I was going to manage that with the software I was using, how I would be able to do it seamlessly without sort of having to improvise too much. So I chose to do a podcast. I've been a fan of them for a long time, and they come in all different forms. Discussion podcasts, podcasts about like gaming news and reviews, ones that I look at for like film theories and film reviews and sort of breaking down directors and stuff. And then you have the more educational ones, like mine would be. That's Philosophize This. He goes through philosophy in sort of like a timeline order, so I sort of took inspiration from that as well. So where I would take it from here is I've posted it to SoundCloud, and that seems to be a pretty good resource because for free, my mum said she's been using it for over a year, and then she had to pay for the subscription. She had that much room to use. So I could, I from the start, like when I realised I was going to do it in a podcast format, I sort of decided, okay, this is going to be the introduction episode, and then if I ever wanted to continue with it, I could maybe make a website specifically for my podcast and continue and make new episodes. And my mum mentioned that she would actually post it to her social media and share it with her friends and family. Any questions?
And you know the Stephen Fry interview. Is that something that's influenced you before actually taking on this project, or was that kind of the sparking reason?
Well, my dad, he told me I should read the book, but he had this other like big volume that looked like an old kind of tome of Greek myths. So I was like, well, I'll check out an interview by him and see where his passion's coming from and see if that is like the same kind of what I'm looking for. So.
Maybe like, what was it again? You chose that Greek mythology over the
Other mythology.
The mythology.
It was Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson. It was the fact that all these monsters were being introduced, and you sort of had an idea. Like everyone sort of knows Medusa and how she turns people to stone, and you stop her by showing her a reflection. But it's like a wider context of things like a specific example is the Furies that were in that these like three sort of hag-raven witch kind of things chasing the main characters throughout the story. But when I looked into the myth, I found out that they came from a specific event that happened within the mythology, and what they do is they go after people who have like sinned. So they are like this sort of pursuing monster, and that's how they were used in the book. So you understand the context more when you actually look back and look at these stories.
You've got a very kind of a very clear idea of why it is you're doing what you're doing. That's I think a really good direction for you. Have you got the? Can we listen to a little extract?
Oh yeah. I don't know what happened to the slide about it. Oh yeah, that was it. I somehow went.
Sorry.
Events and less of a Greek mythology is an expansive and enriching subject. Its stories, characters, settings and themes have transcended myth and crept into many facets of the world as we know it today. From place names to constellations, planets and moons in the night sky, and even into our languages, the myths of ancient Greece live on in our day-to-day lives. It has also made its way into popular culture, from series such as Percy Jackson and God of War, to characters and ideas taken from Greek mythology, such as DC's Wonder Woman being an Amazon, a tribe of warrior women found in Greek myth, or the Justice League being compared to or symbolic of the Olympians, the 12 main gods of Greek worship. My aim in this podcast episode is to lay out the basis for Greek mythology, from chaos and the absence of time, to the reign of the first generation of gods and the Titans, to the rise and prosperity of the Olympians and the creation of mortal man. The ancient Greeks are known for their love of all things cultural and artistic. Many whose names are still known today are still renowned for their paintings and sculptures, poetry and philosophies, and their scientific exploits, particularly in the astrological field. It is from this dedication to art and the pursuit of knowledge that the mythology sprang, often in response to making sense of their own history and of the world around them. The name for such stories that attempt to capture a meaning or reason for why things happen, such as seasons and the weather, is etiology. Before we had scientific explanations for why storms and earthquakes occur, or how the sky is separated from the earth, we blamed it on gods that have the power to bend the environment to their will and lift up the sky on their backs. Poets, authors, and playwrights such as Hesiod, Homer, Sophocles, Plato, and many others popularized much of Greek mythology by putting its stories, which had up until then been spread by word of mouth alone, to pen. This gave the mythology a more solidified outline in terms of an order of events and less of a reliance on interpretation. That said, there is still a large amount of variation between different tellings of the same stories by different writers or depictions in artwork. We will look at a few examples of this throughout this introduction to the mythology. But without further ado, let's start from the beginning.
And that fun fact there, yeah, I just ended up with the music sort of picking songs that had some kind of relevance as well as just being nice background sounds. Like another one was when the Titan Prometheus creates man. The song behind it is Ember, like it's like the spark of a new life.
That's what I
Yeah.
think.
I really like how, like, you put it together. It's just, I mean, even the tone, the way it's like, that is you on, that is you speaking, isn't it? It's like, finally.
It's weird. It sounds like you, but it doesn't sound like you. It's very,
It's me trying to be the most clear I can at the time.
Yeah.
that is really good.
But it's so softly spoken and like the pace, you know, everything you can see everything things with that. Did you make that?
Yeah, I was quite proud of it.
Yeah, no, that's nice. Because you see some of them and they're just like playing in bland kind of screens and but that it's clear on what kind of what you're going to be listening to.
And when I put it on SoundCloud, it got rid of the right side, but it meant that I still had all the sort of information I needed within the square of mythic or Greek mythology pop.
Yeah, that was very, very, very good. Very good. It's nice. I think I should reiterate everything that I was just saying. It's yeah, very good. Well done.
Yeah, yeah.